Hey, good evening. Welcome to our program. I'm Mike McCord. I'm the chair of Citizens Environmental Council. Oh, it's not advancing for me. What am I doing wrong here? Oh, there we go. Okay, our mission is to champion regional sustainability through education, to advocate for environmental and climate policy, and to empower young environmental leaders. We have really four signature programs. We collaborate with a lot of groups and so forth. We have four continuing programs, green programs on hot topics. This is one of them, okay? We have a CEC Student Film Festival. It's in its 8th year now. It won a Jefferson Award in the past year. We collaborate with the County Office of Education and Office of Sustainability and with Peninsula Clean Energy on the Youth Climate Ambassadors Leadership Program. We train about 50 students, 50 high school students a year in that program. And we've been offering college scholarships to Burlingame High School grads for the last 9 years. This will be our 10th year for that program, okay? Upcoming programs, Thursday, November 14th, this will be at the Burlingame Community Center, Living Connected to Place with Matt Bigger, who is a writer, speaker, consultant, collaborator, and so forth, about how we can change systems locally and regionally to support living connected to place and advance collective well-being. On Tuesday, January 28th, 30 by 30, that's an international initiative that's been embraced by the state of California, which aims to conserve 30% of California's lands and coastal waters by the year 2030. And we'll have some people that are involved in running that program to speak to us. Our 8th annual CEC Student Film Fest will be on April 22nd on Earth Day this year. They'll be announcing winners and presenting awards to our winners at the Burlingame High School auditorium. And Sunday, June 1st, Family Fun on the Bay Trail. That's a family event where people bring their kids. We walk around on the Bay Trail, pick up trash, give the kids some equipment, and it's been a real nice time. Okay, obviously I don't expect you to memorize everything I just told you. I hope you would subscribe to our newsletter if you don't already. And because we send that out every 2 to 4 weeks, and that would alert you to programs like this and the other programs I'm listed, and also programs done by our similar organizations in the city of Burlingame and so forth. Okay. Okay, I'm going to turn this over now to Terry Nagel, who put this program together for us, and she is going to introduce our speakers so we can begin our program. Thank you.
Hey, well, thank you, Mike. And we're going to start with Erin Cook. And Erin is, as you see, the Sustainability and Resilience Director of San Francisco International Airport. She is, in fact, the first one to hold that position. And in that role, she creates and implements and reports on the airport's strategic sustainability, zero waste, resilience, and decarbonization plans. The airport has already cut its greenhouse gas emissions by 40%, and it's also has its first zero net energy building. It's banned plastic foodware and water bottles, and it has become a global leader in the sustainable aviation fuel deliveries. Previously, she served as the deputy city manager for the city of Cupertino, and she helped launch Silicon Valley Clean Energy, which is Santa Clara County's equivalent of what we have in San Mateo County called Peninsula Clean Energy. She's a lead AP, and she earned a master's in environmental science and policy from Columbia University. So take it away, Erin.
Aaron, you're muted. Oh, here we go. Oh,
Oh, says host will not let me unmute. Okay.
Okay, I got it. Thank you. We practiced this, everyone, before we came on, so apologies, but I'm glad we were able to work through that. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come and share a little bit more about SFO's sustainability journey with this really incredible audience. 5 organizations working to partner and learn more about decarbonization in aviation. Just makes my heart really happy. It's just an amazing space to work in, and it's really wonderful to see that there are folks that are interested in learning more about this. Particularly for me, Actera was one of the first organizations that I became engaged with in 2008 when I first moved to California, and just think the world of that organization, and they really coached me up in my own professional journey for sustainability. So thank you to all of the folks that, again, are engaged and are interested in sponsoring this work, and again, learning more about an area of deep passion to myself and to Courtney, who is joining me. So
Aaron,
yeah.
Aaron, I'm sorry, let me interrupt just a second. We'll have a Q&A at the end.
Great.
If you have questions coming along as our speakers speak, throw them in the chat box, and we'll try to catch up with those at the end of the program. I should have said that sooner.
That's
Okay.
fine. Yeah. No, we can also, I mean, we love questions on the fly, but yeah, we'll make it more efficient, and then you can get to better understand a little bit more of the climate narrative arc of what we're working on at SFO if we save questions to the end. So thank you for that. So Courtney and I are here really to be your tour guide on the sustainability journey of SFO by talking you through a variety of different things on this call. So we'll start just at a very high level to get a sense of emissions within the aviation sector. There are various members of that sector that many of you are aware of, but maybe some that you aren't. So we'll talk a little bit about who's involved and who's engaged and who are the primary sources of emissions. And then next, we'll talk a little bit about what you as a passenger can do to focus on sustainability throughout your journey, we like to say, from curb to gate and from point of origin to final destination. So we'll give you some tips and tricks to minimize the carbon content of your flight. And then we can talk a little bit just about SFO and our own work. We hope you're intrigued and interested. We are very proud to be the Bay Area's largest airport. We serve primarily origin destination passengers, so those of you that come from and come back to the Bay Area. And so we really want to make sure that we're aligning our work with your own sustainability ambitions and your environmental ethic. And so let's make sure we're hitting that mark today by learning from you in sharing the work that we're doing. And then we'll really close the call in talking about 3 hot topics for us. One is decarbonization, the other is electrification, and then the last is zero waste. So these are what we call our 000 goals. So 0 energy, 0 carbon, and 0 waste. SFO is on a journey to hit those by 2030, and we need all of your help and support in enabling that. So again, that's our flight itinerary. I'll use as many puns as I possibly can over this journey, mostly to make my very punny dad proud, who's not joining the call, but he's here in spirit through all of my puns. So we'll start by talking about aviation emissions, again, across our sector. So it's important to kind of recognize the difference between the carbon footprint of global tourism and then what maybe your own emissions or carbon footprint might look like. So what we see on the left here is really a pie chart that really covers what the emissions are across all aspects of tourism. So as someone that's engaging in this travel journey, it's great to be aware that really the majority of your footprint is coming from the transportation that you choose. So choosing to fly with airlines that really support this decarbonization journey, aircraft that fly new aircraft or that are using sustainable aviation fuel is a great way to really drive down that transportation footprint. But also just being aware that there are things you can completely cut. If you're not purchasing anything, no goods during your travel, that's 12% gone. If you are focusing on really eating healthy, and in many cases not buying disposable containers for those food and beverages to go with you, that's another 10%. So just being a mindful traveler is a really important way to make sure that your global footprint or your carbon footprint from your global travel in many cases is as low as it can be. The other thing to keep in mind is that really our emissions as individuals is based upon our economic ability to engage in travel. So when you look at the chart that's shown over here on the right, we see that the United States actually has the highest global share of aviation emissions or air travel. And the reason is just that economically, our nation is doing much better than other countries. So we have a lot of disposable income that allows us to travel more than other people do. And because of that, we take more trips, we fly further, and we often fly to destinations where others can't reach, or they, again, don't have the dollars or the ability economically to do so. So that's why the US has just so much more of an emissions footprint than others. And then the other is just really thinking about the efficiency of travel, though I'm saying that the majority of your emissions are coming from aircraft. Be very aware that since the first international flight, when we most think about the jet age and when emissions or when aircraft were able to fly to further distances, we start at like the 1960s. The efficiency of aircraft is actually improved by multitude. So I think it's actually something around the lines of like it's 90% more efficient than it was in the 60s. And so because of that, as you look at the impact of flying, it actually can be a lot less than taking a single occupancy vehicle to a destination. Though we all love a good road trip, just being aware that as the efficiency of aircraft is improved, and will continue to do so as we put things in like alternative fuels, or we look to electrify or bring in hydrogen aircraft, those flights are going to be increasingly less impactful than things like driving a combustion vehicle to your destination. So again, as we think a little bit about your passenger journey, there's a lot of ways to engage in that a little bit more. Next slide, Courtney. And then maybe another component of this, and I want folks to be aware of this from the travel perspective. So one beautiful thing you have access to right now is Google Flights. I use it myself exclusively because though certainly there are a lot of optimization tools out there that can tell you what the best price point is, Google actually has integrated an emissions engine that will tell you the impact of your flight over other alternatives. And the way that they're doing this is they're actually pooling in data from different airlines that will tell you how efficient their aircrafts are that are part of their fleet mix. What they tend to have is in terms of their payload and their seat capacity. It's very important that the ratio of that is high. We want to make sure that basically we have an entire aircraft that has butts in seats. Sorry to say that, but that's really what we say officially in our field. We really want to make sure that that every aircraft seat is full, because otherwise those are very inefficient emissions to take an aircraft to a final destination. So that efficiency factor is incredibly important. And all of those things are actually pooled into your Google Flight Tracker. So it'll tell you how efficient your flight is compared to another airline or another destination. So definitely take a look at that. And then what it's bringing in is really a look ahead at the net emissions of aviation. So over here, what we see on the chart in front of us, and just to give you that global picture, really aviation emissions, our emissions curve is expected to grow exponentially. We're expecting by 2050 to actually triple the amount of flights of today. And that's just because the economies that were shown on the slide before are growing, and they're giving people more disposable income to be able to travel. Which is a wonderful thing for those nations and those individuals. We want to get people into our skies so that they can see other locales. They can really experience the cultures of other nations. Flight and aviation has brought so many people together, and we want to be able to continue that. However, we absolutely need to make sure that we have an emissions reduction portfolio that can drive the the flight cost to our environment down significantly. And so the way that our global aviation sector is doing that is, number one, we've set an aspirational target that is net zero carbon by 2050. This has been adopted by the United Nations International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO. It has also been adapted by all of our airlines through the International Air Transport Association, IATA, also by Airlines for America, and then lastly by the Airport Council International. So every member of our sector has focused on and has made this global commitment. And the way that we're going to actually drive down those emissions is, if we were to continue business as usual, we would be on this green curve of growth, or blue curve of growth. However, with the advent of new aircraft technologies, so more efficient engines, things like those cool little winglets you see on the end of the aircraft wing, if you look at it, it now flips up. It makes the plane more aerodynamic. And then also orange, operational improvements. So things like we have what's called Next Gen, which is really focusing on efficient flight paths. So making sure that the highway over skies really routes in the most efficient way, as direct as possible to the point of destination. And then very lastly, really our silver bullet and our keystone is going to be sustainable aviation fuel. So these fuels are made from alternative products, often byproducts, things like fats, oils, and greases, or waste residues, forest biomass, waste woody biomass. These can actually be blended into a fuel similar to renewable diesel, and they are actually drop into the fuselage of our aircraft. And they can reduce emissions by up to 80% if the blend rate was 100%. So 80% emission reduction, and also 80% reduction in criteria air pollutants or on particulate matter, that soot that can come out of an aircraft. So lots of potential there, and a very strong trajectory for the aviation sector. We'll talk a little bit about how SFO is integrating that. Next slide. So just again, talking about passenger sustainability, that was aviation sector. Maybe I brought it a little bit more forward. As you can see, generally there are nations that have strong perspectives and incredible leaders like my girl Greta here, who are really thinking of alternative pathways or alternative forms of travel because they know that aviation has a big carbon profile. And we respect that. And because of that, we really want to be able to drive down our emissions. So what is happening right now is that we're looking at how we can really look at the reduction in the carbon dioxide or the greenhouse gas emissions per mile or per flight. I've given a lot of examples of how that's happening right now, but you can see that generally our longer flights have larger carbon emissions. So something to be mindful of as we're booking our next trip. Go ahead, Courtney, next one. Also, it does very much vary by airline. And the reason is that those airlines are choosing to do either quicker fleet replacements when an aircraft is no longer efficient. Some of those, honestly, the 7 series out of Boeing are starting to be retired, and the 6 series specifically. And the reason is just that those engines are no longer able to process the fuel that they're using at an efficient rate. So what we're seeing is a lot of visibility and transparency in the efficiency of our airlines and what the carbon cost or the carbon content is per airline. So maybe keep a visual snapshot of this in mind when you're looking at the next airline you're buying. Though again, the Google Flight Tracker will help you. And I'm guessing that as you're looking at a flight, it will very much correlate to the airlines that we're mentioning on this, that are shown on the screen, to the most efficient option for your flight. Next slide. And maybe just one last thing to note is that it is also, wherever possible, to fly during the day is also an incredibly beneficial way to reduce your emissions. And the reason is, as you're flying at night, there's a lot more intensity of the contrails or the emissions that are coming out of the aircraft. If you look in the sky and you see that white line at night, there's a lot more intensity of the reflectivity of that contrail, and it can actually cause global warming at a higher level. So maybe a fun little scientific fact, if you want to learn more about the next generation of aviation's focused on environment, look up contrails, but I could spend an entire hour talking about that. So again, we've started at a global scale, and now what we really want to narrow down is talk a little bit about what is SFO doing to reduce its own impact within this macro emissions profile that we all have a role in. So just to give you a quick picture of SFO by our numbers, prior to COVID, we welcomed 58 million passengers, and we had about 180 concessions, meaning the food and beverage restaurants that we all know and love, over 45 airlines serving the airport, and we're almost back at pre-COVID levels. It took us a bit longer to get back there because we are an international airport that is the gateway to Asia Pacific, and Asia Pacific opened the market a lot later than other countries. So we're climbing, and we're expecting to exceed that this year. We are a large campus. So for those of you that work for big corporates in the Bay Area or are aware of them, our footprint is pretty similar to probably a Google or an Apple or a Facebook. We have about 21 million square feet of space. And we're really growing. And the reason that we're growing is that we're an economic engine for the Bay Area. Not only are we the gateway to Silicon Valley and to San Francisco, one of my personal favorite cities, and a lot of people's favorite cities from across the world, but we are the largest economic driver for San Mateo County, providing over $8 billion in economic activity and 42,000 jobs. So those are the people that are driving the baggage carriers and belt loaders, the folks that are working at our restaurants, the folks that are in our Transportation Security Administration and are welcoming you in with open arms as you're going through security. These are really important jobs to the Bay Area. And so it's incredibly important that we maintain the continuity of our operations, despite the fact that we are increasingly threatened by climate change. Sea level rise is expected to certainly impact our airport. We're experiencing more extreme precipitation and had to do with the confluence of events between COVID-19 and about 1,200 active wildfires at one time, which I can tell you from a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning filtration system was quite challenging. So just be aware that this is something that we are incredibly pressed to address and feel incredibly committed to do so, both as a leader in the aviation sector, but also a representative of the Bay Area and the environmental mentality and priority of all of our residents. So we want you to be proud to fly through the airport, and we want to make sure that you know that we're doing what we can to reduce both the emissions of ourselves and then also our airlines. Next slide. And to that end, as someone who's worked in the sustainability sector my entire career, which I can say has spanned more than 2 decades, prior to the point when there were even sustainability degrees available in my undergraduate program, I will say I'm incredibly proud of the fact that the airport has adopted a new mission statement that focuses on people and planet first. I've not worked for an organization that has done that, but I think where this is our global ambition, this is our North Star, having an organization with a North Star that is so focused on people and planet is something I'm incredibly proud of. And then this last year, we worked to adopt a new strategic plan that is focusing on taking bold climate action. So it's not just about the zeros I mentioned, zero energy, zero carbon, and zero waste. It's really about being so bold that we really motivate and encourage and foster partnerships to enable others to do this alongside of us. So our 4.2 goal, as well as recognizing that we can't just mitigate our emissions anymore. It's not just about reduction. It's about responsibility and agility to the climate crisis that we're already facing and confronting. And so our airport is in the middle of doing a massive resilience plan, looking at what we expect to be the geologic and climatic threats that we'll face and how we can make sure our critical assets, things like our air traffic control towers, our terminals, and in many cases, a hangar or two can be available no matter what as critical facilities, given the vulnerabilities that we're confronting. So lots to come in the next 5 years as part of the implementation of that, but we'll walk you through a few today. Next slide, Courtney. Thank you. And we want to certainly not do this in isolation. Our organization feels an incredible responsibility to, number one, make sure that our passengers, as they're on their journey, can see and sense and actually actively engage in reducing the emissions and the impact of their own travel experience. And what's shown on the left are just some visuals we have. So hopefully we can make it fun and playful for you to see, again, what we're doing from both an environmental but also a social impact perspective. And then 3, we can ideally encourage you to make choices in your life that can make a difference on the ground here in San Francisco, but also wherever your point of destination is. So things like having, elegantly designed hydration stations, so you'll want to fill up your water bottle before you travel, a surplus of EV charging stations, so it's easier to charge and feel comfortable that when you return, your vehicle will be ready to head home. And also simple, streamlined things like our materials trios, so you know what goes where and can help us hit our zero waste goals. Next slide, Courtney. And then, am I handing it to you here, I think? Oh, Courtney can't unmute either. So I want to thank Courtney for number one, joining our organization. She's been probably one of the best hires I've been lucky enough to have in my entire career. And she is going to be an incredible navigator as the lead of our decarbonization work to just talk you through that as I unfortunately slide away to go to my daughter's volleyball game. But I am here to answer any questions until I do. And just again, want to thank everyone for their interest and their attention, and hopefully their flights to SFO through SFO that they, again, feel proud of, and or identify some opportunities for us on the sustainability team to implement that will make you even more so proud of the work of your hometown airport. So thank you. Go ahead, Courtney.
Thanks, Erin. Hi, everyone. I'm Courtney Carew. I am SFO's Net Zero Carbon Lead. I'm going to start off talking about decarbonization, which is near and dear to my heart as someone who's leading the portfolio along with Erin and so many other stakeholders to reduce emissions at the airport. So before we talk about reducing our emissions, we have to know where they come from. So tracking and understanding emissions is key for both setting goals, the ones Erin's had mentioned, and developing strategies to reduce our carbon impact. We break up our greenhouse gas inventory emissions into scopes based on both the origin of emissions and our ability to control them. Looking at the graph on the right, Scope 1 emissions are those that are under our direct control, such as energy use, transportation, and facility operations, which, as you can see, count for less than 1% of our 2023 emissions profile. Like Erin mentioned, SFO has a goal of reaching net zero carbon by 2030, as shown on the graph on the right. And currently the majority of Scope 1 emissions, which again are those under our direct control, come from natural gas, this green bar, which we plan to eliminate by replacing natural gas with an all-electric central utilities plant. Moving on to Scope 2. Scope 2 emissions are those that are from electricity, represented by this gray bar here. SFO has received 100% carbon-free electricity since 2012, so our emissions from Scope 2 sources are 0, which makes my job as the decarbonization lead a lot easier. And then lastly, the majority of our emissions are from Scope 3, as you can see in this big dark blue section of the pie chart, which are emissions from tenant and passenger activities on campus and to an extent within a wider region. So these include things like passenger travel to and from the airport, rental cars, and unsurprisingly, the largest culprit is aircraft, which you can see makes up over 96% of our total emissions at SFO. So how do we and the aviation industry as a whole plan to address this? One way is through sustainable aviation fuel, also known as SAF. SAF is a jet fuel that's made from renewable materials, such as biomass and waste-based feedstocks like used cooking oil and animal fats. Like Erin mentioned, 100% SAF can reduce emissions over the life cycle up to 80%, which is why it really is a key driver for decarbonization. In addition to emission reductions, SAF also reduces certain criteria air pollutants by 90 to 100%, which improves the air quality for the health of our staff on the ground and for our local Bay Area as a whole. Another benefit of SAF is that it is a drop-in fuel, meaning that it can be used in existing aircraft without additional costs for engine modifications or special equipment. However, there are challenges with SAF deployment at a large scale. SAF currently makes up less than 1.1% of global aircraft fuel, and additionally, it is 4 times more expensive than conventional fossil-based fuel. The prices for SAF are expected to decrease as conventional jet fuel prices increase, but until SAF production and technologies improve to reach cost parity, federal and state incentives are needed to help close the gap. And additionally, 2 other challenges are that feedstocks used for SAF are also used for other biofuels. So the supply and diversity of feedstocks is a bit in competition with other biofuels that may be more valuable to make at this time. And then lastly, the risk of investing in SAF is larger than in other biofuel industries, and that combined with the cost of producing the fuel can deter both investors and fuel production facilities in investing facilities needed to increase production. With these challenges in mind, SFO has been working to build collaborative partnerships to expand deliveries and infrastructure for SAF, led by Erin. We call her the SAF guru. Maybe just I do that, but she has really been driving SAF work both in California, in the United States, and globally. So starting off with a quick roadmap of our timeline, in 2017, SFO, led by Erin, brought together a coalition of 150 airlines, conventional and alternative fuel providers, and other organizations to work collaboratively towards expanding the development and use of SAF at SFO and throughout California. And then just touching on a few of these other points quickly, in 2018, SAF hosted multiple SAF demo flights, which showcased the technology's viability and potential for achieving significant carbon reductions. And then, let's see, moving on to 2019, SFO conducted a SAF feasibility study defining how to best address the $1 billion infrastructure needed to resolve supply chain challenges in bringing SAF to SFO. And then a year later, we began a continuous supply of SAF to SFO, with reaching 10 million gallons of SAF at SFO in August 2022. Just for some perspective, currently about 14 million gallons of SAF are produced worldwide, meaning that we at SFO are receiving more than 70% or about 70% of the worldwide supply, primarily due to Erin's leadership and the SAF working group that she's developed. And then lastly, we have a goal of reaching 5% SAF by 2025. It's pretty ambitious, and I don't know if we are going to reach it in all honesty, but we're really working both within our airport, with other airports, and then with fuel producers and airlines to push for more incentives needed to increase the supply of SAF, both in California and globally. So that was a little bit about decarbonization as a whole. I'll kind of dive down into electrification. There's a lot here, so I'm going to give a quick overview, just being cognizant of the time. So we have a lot of electrification initiatives. Like I mentioned, we receive 100% greenhouse gas electricity. So by fuel switching a lot of these buildings and transportation and other advanced energy assets, we have a massive decarbonization potential. But with all of these additional assets coming online, we do run into the issue of having sufficient electrical capacity. So one of our key initiatives at the top here is in our electrical capacity program, evaluating a new substation to make sure that when we bring all these assets online, we have enough capacity to support them electrically. And then moving on to transportation electrification, we have a goal of purchasing 100% zero emission vehicle fleet vehicles by 2027. Currently, we are at about 56% for our light duty passenger vehicles and 25% for shuttles. So we have a ways to go, but we have been fortunate in receiving a number of grant funding from the FAA to increase the deployment of both vehicles and the electrical infrastructure needed to support them. Which goes on to our EV charging goal. We currently have about 400 EV chargers for passenger, employee, and the public use. Excuse me, with about 70 of them being smart, meaning that we can load manage them and reduce them at times when we need to prioritize electricity for other uses, such as during flex alerts during wildfires. In addition to landside transportation, we are aiming to electrify airside transportation as well, through converting ground support equipment to electric. So ground support equipment, or GSE, are those little vehicles that go around the airfield that push back aircraft and also deliver bags. Currently, about 39% of those are electric, and we have almost 490 charging ports to support those. And then, like I mentioned a bit earlier about building electrification, one of our key decarbonization measures will be to install an all-electric central utilities plant. So converting all of our buildings that are currently natural gas to electric, which has huge potential to decarbonize. And we have a goal of making that operational by 2030. And then just a little bit about our renewable energy. Like Erin mentioned, we have a net zero energy goal by 2030. And so in support of that, we recently completed a solar feasibility study to determine the potential size and scale of solar that can be generated across campus. So that's current and planned parking garages, parking lots, and building rooftops. We currently have 13 existing systems with a combined 4 megawatts of installed generation. And so through our study, we found that 50 megawatts of new solar installations can be installed on campus across 95 locations, which can provide approximately 30% of our electricity use and campus-wide resilience benefits. Excuse me. So that's just a little bit about renewable energy. And then moving on to waste. I'll talk a little bit about our timeline for zero waste concessions. In 2017, we started our food donation program called SFO Unites Against Hunger, which is a food recovery program. So all of those insanely expensive sandwiches that don't get bought at the airport can then be collected by our team and donated to local groups in need. Our Unites Against Hunger food recovery program currently recovers over 30,000 pounds of food a year, which is equivalent to about 27,000 meals, and results in a saving of 10 million gallons of water and diverts 84 metric tons of CO2 from being released into the atmosphere. And in 2019, we were one of the first, if not the first, airport to ban plastic water bottles. So those of you who have traveled through SFO know that after security, we have water refill stations. And with the banning of plastic water bottles, we really wanted to encourage passengers to bring their own and to be able to conveniently refill their water after going through security. So as an ongoing effort, we've installed over 100 hydration stations and plan to expand as we update our terminals every so often. And then in 2021, we expanded from just water to no plastic bottled beverages at all. So all beverages at SFO are sold in aluminum cans, which have one of the highest recycling rates, or glass bottles. And I should have mentioned, if you don't bring your own water bottle, you can also purchase those just now in aluminum, which again has a higher recycling rate. And then in 2023, we began a fiber foodware program. And so this is, rather than using some of these compostable plastics, which we found in our research actually don't end up being composted as much as we would like, we have been switching to fiber foodware, which has a much higher diversion rate from landfill and also breaks down much quicker than some of those compostable plastics. So there's a lot that we can do and are planning to do to reduce waste stream contamination and items going to landfill, but the greatest opportunity to reduce waste lies in reducing our sources of waste themselves. And so reusables are really our #1 solution if the aim is to reduce waste generation overall. We are currently developing a reusable dishware program that will be piloted in 2 of our food courts in 2025, which we're really excited about and has the potential, or what we're aiming for is a 90% diversion rate from landfill. So for sit-down dining, we will be using, what you tend to use at home, ceramic plates, silverware, and forks, etc. And then we'll also have the options for reusable containers. This is a really exciting pilot program we are working on, which will require a lot of work to have terminal-wide collection points, maybe tracking technology or return incentives, and then also an opportunity for airline and airport industry partnerships. So talking about working with other airlines, first in California, to maybe pilot reusables so that if someone is flying from SFO to LAX and they take a reusable container with them, that they can return that container at LAX, for example. And then LAX will be able to use it. And then our kind of last option will again be single-use fiber foodware, and we'll change that to upon request only. So it is still an option, but by kind of pushing these reusable dishwares and containers to the forefront of people's minds, we're hoping to create a sort of behavior and culture change. And this fiber-based foodware will be simple for tenants, again, also easier for waste diversion as they are better to be composted. So again, we are starting this in 2025, and we're building out the program's required infrastructure and testing logistics and operations over a period of 3 months, where we'll both collect quantitative and qualitative data and feedback. And then after analyzing this data, the aim is to expand the program in new terminals and existing terminals, and project having the pilot available airport-wide by 2027. So that was a lot of information. We kind of wanted to cover some of just the highlights about the aviation industry as a whole, what we are doing at SFO, and then breaking it down by carbon, energy, and waste, which are really our focuses in reaching 000 by 2030. So with that, that is the end of our presentation. Excuse me. I'm happy to answer any questions. I haven't been looking at the chat, so I'm not sure if there are any, but happy to talk more now, or you can also reach Erin and I by email. We also recently launched a new website, sustainability.flysfo.com, where you can learn more about our initiatives and what we're doing at the airport to reduce our environmental impact.
Great. Thank you very, very much, Courtney. That was really interesting. And I posted a question in the chat. I don't know if you can see it, but just curious as to how SFO ranks compared to other US airports regarding sustainability. Do you have any idea?
That's a good question. There's not a certified ranking necessarily. There is a program called the Airport Carbon Accreditation Program, which accredits airports based on the tracking of their emissions, and then also absolute emission reductions. And we're currently at a level 4. I think we are the first large hub airport in North America to reach that level. Now other airports are catching up. I think San Diego, Dallas, Fort Worth, and a few others are at that level. So there's no ranking, but that kind of helps us we have a friendly competition with peers in terms of sustainability and improving our environmental impact. So yeah, no ranking, but we like to try and work with our other airports, and also work a lot with European airports who are a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of sustainability.
So Mike, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. We are, I see San Mateo County and San Francisco as real leaders in the climate protection focus. And I'm wondering, what happens in red states? So do airports in places where it's not a popular issue feel a pressure to do some of the things that you're doing?
Yeah, that's a
federal things that would push this along.
That's a great question, Mike. It's kind of hard to tell. It's really unfortunate. There are some of our airport counterparts who are in states where their state government won't recognize climate change as being real and a tangible impact on the environment. And so we're really lucky being where we are and also having airport leadership that has really incorporated sustainability in our operations. Like Erin mentioned, our new strategic goal motto is putting people and the planet first. So having that leadership has really helped. But in terms of the country where climate change is not a popular issue, we can't really do much to incentivize. We try and be there as, a thought leader to support in terms of how we're looking at our emissions, what we're doing to reduce them. But we have talked with airports that, maybe don't have as much material support behind them in their climate programs or looking at starting a program. And so in that way, we kind of share our findings in, how to start from zero and just beginning to look at your emissions, quantifying them, and then working towards reducing them.
I just thought of another question that I'm not going to bother to type.
Yeah, no, go for
That
it.
is that, I think when I bought airline tickets recently, they offer me a chance to buy an offset, for the carbon emissions.
Yeah.
What is that in that offset? What are they selling?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think probably by airline, they might have some small details about where their offsets are being purchased from. For those of you who don't know, offsets are a controversial topic, rightfully so. I could go into them for a very long time, but a lot of airlines are giving you the option to purchase an add-on to reduce the environmental impact of your flight. And that is money that is going to funding carbon offset programs to sequester carbon and also retain it. So meaning that if you purchase to support offsets this year, they will be maintained throughout the lifespan of the project, ideally, to make sure that those reductions are material. They are controversial though, because the offset market unfortunately doesn't have a lot of regulation. And so there have been some, for lack of a better word, sketchy offsets where you can pay really cheap and it says that you're, addressing your carbon footprint, but they've found out that these projects maybe aren't as environmentally helpful as they say they are, or that the projects aren't being maintained, meaning the carbon is then being released. So what we've seen some airlines doing is moving away from offsets and allowing passengers to purchase SAF. So the money that they purchase or add on to reduce their environmental footprint then will go towards SAF production, which, like we talked about, is a big way to decarbonize and is also very costly.
Great. So, Courtney, there's another question from Elaine Salinger saying, does SFO have a position on carbon pricing, putting a price on carbon?
Yeah, that's a great question, Elaine. I don't know in terms of what our official position on carbon pricing is. We do work with a number of other companies within the Bay Area that are doing a lot in terms of carbon, Bay Area and beyond. So like Google, Salesforce, Okta, Workplace, and Microsoft. We've been in discussions with them as some of them have done carbon pricing. Microsoft has a really great paper, a white paper on carbon pricing that essentially says that most companies that do have carbon pricing are underestimating the cost of it and are not accounting for the social cost of carbon. So I don't know what our official position is yet, or if we even have one, but we definitely are looking into it. And then also making sure that it's a triple bottom line analysis. So it's both financial and then also social and including governmental on that as well.
Okay. I had another question about what the plan is for dealing with sea level rise. Are you going to build a big wall around the airport, or what's happening with that?
Yeah, that's close to it. We have a airport planning group that does long-term airport planning, and they currently have a shoreline protection program that
Mhm.
they're working on. I think that is currently going through the permitting phase, but essentially it is a seawall. I think there may be an existing one, and they're working on increasing the height of it. I don't know. I can definitely follow up, but like Erin mentioned, we realize that despite what we do and what so many others do, climate change is here. And so anticipating sea level rise and really building out our resiliency now is key. And so I can definitely provide more information on our shoreline protection program, but it is one thing that's being analyzed in the resiliency plan that Erin mentioned we're beginning.
Yeah, I would be very interested in that because as you know, what one city or the airport does affects the neighbors around it too, and they're also doing plans, so.
Yes,
like,
definitely.
See how this mesh. Okay, and how many airlines fly out of SFO and how many flights are there a day? I'm just curious.
Ooh, that is a good question. I wonder if we have that in our, let me see. In our first slide about SFO. So this is 45. I think this is a little bit out of date, and it says
Wow.
200,000 landings. We do uplift a ton of fuel, over I think 1 billion gallons of Jet A
Wow.
annually. I'll have to check on updated numbers, but yeah, it is a large volume. Definitely the largest in the Bay Area.
And also, where do you donate your airline surplus, or is it surplus food from the concessions, or is it from the flights, the meals on the planes?
Yeah, it's currently just from our concessions, but we donate them to a few local groups. So for a lot of those like pre-packaged ready to go meals, we donate them to Safe Harbor. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. It is a local homeless shelter that is actually very close to airport property. So we donate a good number of meals there. And then a lot of times also concessions will have more bulk food or bulk items that they use to make their fresh food. So like flour or olive oil or pasta sauce. And we donate that to the Samaritan House in San Carlos Belmont, or the San Carlos Belmont border. So yeah, we work closely with them and Safe Harbor to make those deliveries on time so that the food can be used and still good.
What do the airlines do with their leftover meals?
That's
they-
a good question. I'm not sure exactly. When I started at SFO, I did take a tour of like the airline food kitchen area, and they were very, they are a lot leaner in terms of excess, because they do have counts for like how many people are going to be on the flight. They also have a very strict timelines about how long the food is good for. And so I think the majority of the food that they package for the flights gets consumed. And if not, it's maybe a few extra meals. And I'm not sure what they do with that. But I think, again, it depends on kind of the timeline from when it's been made to when they're serving it to passengers.
Okay, so let's see. Elaine has posted something about the way that carbon fees can be returned to people and make it more equitable. Anybody else have a question for Courtney? So if not, we will thank you all for coming. I think it's been fascinating to learn more about what the airport's doing, and hope that you continue your sustainable journey, Courtney. It sounds like you're really one of the leaders in the nation in making that happen. So thank you. Okay. And we want to refer other folks to, okay, want to refer people to our website, which is CEC Burlingame, for Citizens Environmental Council in Burlingame. And we would love to have you sign up for a newsletter so you can follow along with all the wonderful programs we have and the things that we're doing, and perhaps want to join us in that work. So thank you for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Terry, and the rest of Citizens Environmental Council. Just dropping our website link if people want to learn more about their initiatives. And I can also send you the slides to send out after if that would be helpful, but I'll include my email in the chat if you have any follow-up questions. And we're always happy to talk more.
Okay, great. We will share the slides as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Have a
Okay.
great night.
Thanks,
Okay.
everyone.
Thank you, everybody.